After being mistaken for an omega by my archenemy that night, I underwent a secondary differentiation, from a beta to an omega. She even carried his cub in her belly and was often bewitched and infatuated by his pheromones, unable to control herself. But he still hangs around me every day, and from time to time he pulls open my collar and gets close to smell it. It's just a sniff, it won't cost you a piece of meat, are you scared? I was angry, just smell it. Who's afraid? As he was smelling, he suddenly felt a warm breath from the gland at the back of his neck, and hard canine teeth pressed against him. His voice became hoarse. Baby, you smell so good, can I have a bite? What? Don't want. I screamed and woke up from my dream, and was stunned when I saw the mess on the bed. It wasn't a dream. Everything that happened last night was playing in my mind like a review of the past. Yesterday when I was drinking at home with Vim, his estrus period suddenly came early. When I was injecting the inhibitor into him, because I had been drinking, my hands were shaking so much that I didn't know whether the drug had been injected or not. Later he kept complaining about being hot, and after taking off his own shirt, he started clamoring to help me take it off. He was too strong and I couldn't break free, so I started fighting with him. When we regained consciousness, we were already lying in bed without knowing when. I don't remember what happened afterwards, but I just remember that he mistook me for an omega and spent the whole night with me. I supported my waist and slowly stood up. Turning around and seeing Vim sleeping, he got so angry that he kicked him in the face. You're such a mad dog. I told you I don't want it anymore. His eyelashes fluttered a few times, and I quickly retracted my foot and limped away before he woke up. After returning home and cleaning up, I slept till night. After waking up, I always feel a dull pain in my lower abdomen and feel weak all over. After cursing Vim again in my mind, I picked up my phone and checked the time. Only then did I realize that there were more than a dozen missed calls, all from him. I opened WeChat and saw more than a dozen messages from him. You left. I won't drink so much next time. My head hurts. How did my inhibitor fall to the ground? The house is such a mess. You left without even waiting for me to wake up to clean it up. Are you still a brother? We're not going to fight, are we? Why does my arm hurt so much? How could it not hurt? Yesterday he insisted on holding me up and I stood up, and I was so scared that I twisted his arm several times. You should cut your nails. If you want to fight, then fight. My back is full of your scratches. Why don't you answer the phone? It seems that he doesn't remember what happened yesterday. But it doesn't matter. If both people remember something like that, it would just be embarrassing for each other. My head was getting more and more dizzy, so I simply washed up, changed my clothes and prepared to go out to buy some medicine. Unexpectedly, as soon as I opened the door, I saw Vim standing at the door, ready to knock. As soon as he saw me, his expression immediately became aggrieved. Did I do something to you last night? My heart skipped a beat. Did he remember? I laughed dryly. Let's just pretend this never happened. He quickly interrupted me. I did hit you. How badly did I hit you? I made you so angry that you ignored me. Hearing him say this, I suddenly breathed a sigh of relief and patted his shoulder as if I didn't care. Am I the kind of person who would suffer a loss? It's just that I drank too much last night and my head has been dizzy. I slept until now. The sleeve slowly slid down as I raised it. Before I could react, Vim suddenly grabbed my hand. Why are your arms covered in red spots? Are there still mosquitoes in this season? I remembered someone biting around like a dog last night, and then my mood turned bad, and I couldn't help but slap him on the back of the head. Get lost, bastard. The next second, my chin was pinched hard, and Vim frowned slightly. If you keep saying dirty words, I'll wash your mouth. The soft fingertips brushed across my lips, in an adult way. I was speechless and could only raise my foot and step on his toes. Seeing him grimacing in pain, I finally vented my anger. But I shrugged my nose and asked, do you smell anything? He held the door open and said unhappily, I don't smell anything. Is there something wrong with my sense of smell? Ever since I met Vim, I have been smelling a faint scent of roses. My lower abdomen started to ache again, and I waved him away impatiently. Don't block my way. I need to go out to buy medicine. Unexpectedly, he pulled me out directly. Are you a doctor? Do you know what medicine I should take? Come with me to the hospital. I wanted to break free, but then I changed my mind and realized that I had been feeling unwell since I woke up this morning, so I should go to the hospital. Then he followed Vim's force and left. 3. After arriving at the hospital and completing the examination, the doctor looked at Vim hesitantly and asked him to leave. I was a little confused. Doctor, is there something wrong with my body? He looked at the medical report. Kerwin, have you had sex recently? I couldn't help but blush, and under the doctor's serious expression, I stammered and answered, it happened once last night. He pushed the frame of his glasses on his nose. It's like this, Kerwin. You have a second sex in your body. The test results show that your second sex is in the development stage. It should be affected by alpha pheromones for a long time. It has now matured. I was completely stunned, swallowing hard, and heard the doctor's ruthless announcement. To put it simply, you have undergone secondary differentiation from beta to omega. It was like a bolt from the blue, hitting me on the head and making me speechless. Since I started my internship in my senior year, if I got off work too late, I would stay overnight at Vim's house. Was it because of sleeping in the same bed every day during that period that you had an impact? Then tonight, I hurriedly asked, if I differentiate into an omega, will I be able to smell other people's pheromones? The doctor nodded. It turns out that the smell I smelled tonight was Vim's pheromones. The doctor prescribed me some medicine and gave me some instructions before I left. Because your situation is rather special, it's best for you to stay with the alpha you've had sex with before. His pheromones can help you stabilize. What? I have to stay with Vim every day? I walked out of the ward in a daze and saw the culprit leaning against the wall. When he saw me coming out, he said in a nasty way, "How is it? What did the doctor say?" My heart was heavy. I'm done. Seeing that my expression didn't look fake, he immediately became serious. What's wrong? Don't worry, we'll listen to the doctor and get good treatment, and we'll definitely get better. I shook my head in despair. It won't get better. He walked over and hugged me, his voice choking. I will definitely find a better doctor to cure you. I won't let you die. I broke free from his embrace and knocked him on the head. What are you talking about? Who's going to die? He covered his head in pain. You walked out with a tragic look on your face and kept saying that it was over and there was no cure. Didn't you find out that you had a terminal illness? Seeing his stupid look, I clenched my fists. I must not tell this guy. And I can't rely on his pheromones. For the place where I was doing my internship was very close to Vim's home, and I almost always lived at his house for convenience. It would take too long to move all the stuff now, so I could only pick and choose a few pieces of clothing and important documents. He leaned against the door and looked at me, his face full of displeasure. Why are you moving away? Isn't it convenient to live here? I ignored him. Of course we have to move out, otherwise if we stay together all day, we might end up having sex accidentally. This guy is like a beast in bed. I absolutely don't want anything like that to happen to me a second time. Vim and I grew up together and can be considered childhood sweethearts. Our two families have a very good relationship. Ever since I met him, he has always been better than me. Even the girls I like will give me a nice guy card when they see him. I regarded him as my mortal enemy and vowed to fight him to the end. If it were the day before yesterday, I couldn't imagine myself sleeping with him. But since it has already happened and he doesn't remember it, there is still room for redemption. I carried my packed luggage, didn't even want to glance at him, and left without looking back. He seemed unusually silent. Under normal circumstances, he would have tried every means to stop me. But I really don't have the energy to think too much about his abnormality. After moving out of Vim's house, I returned to my normal life. Going to work and going home is a straight line. The company worked overtime that day, and it was already 11 o'clock in the evening when I got off work. The cars have all stopped and it's hard to get a taxi around here. Also, since this morning, the back of my neck has been feeling hot and my head has been feeling dizzy. Plus, my lower abdomen is also hurting. Suddenly, I regretted not listening to the doctor's warning. I don't know if it's the influence of hormones, But at this moment I actually miss Vim's pheromones. After trying to hail a taxi on my phone for half an hour with no one taking the order, I decided to take a shortcut to another street to hail a taxi. The path was close to the bar, the lights were dim, and groups of people were standing under the street lights hugging each other. I lowered my head and walked past them quickly. Unexpectedly, when passing a certain intersection, his mouth was covered and he was dragged into a dark corner. Someone was pressing on me, and a deep voice was heard in my ears. An omega who doesn't even have a suppressant patch on and walks here with a fragrant scent, are you waiting for some alpha to take you home? I couldn't smell my own scent, and after getting used to being a beta, I had no idea that I was an omega. The person in front of me took a deep breath on me, then slowly reached his fingers along the hem of my clothes and touched my waist. The uncomfortable touch made my whole body stiffen. I closed my eyes, counted to 3, and then kicked him hard in the crotch. I don't know if it was the influence of pheromones, but this kick almost used up all my strength. Before I could stumble to my feet, the enraged man grabbed me and threw me to the ground. Why are you pretending to be so noble? You're still hanging out outside during the estrus period. Aren't you just trying to seduce me? I've seen a lot of people like you. Don't worry, I have experience and I guarantee that I'll make you feel comfortable. Sensing that the person in front of me was getting closer, I began to struggle violently. Although I differentiated into an omega, I was a beta in the first 20 years of my life. In order to surpass Vim, I kept exercising, so I have quite a lot of muscles and I am also very tall. No matter how uncomfortable I felt, I fought back hard and the man gradually couldn't stand it anymore. He suddenly stood up impatiently and kicked me in the stomach. Behave yourself. It hurts. The pain instantly spread throughout my body. It shouldn't hurt so much if it was just a kick. But this pain was too unusual, as if a thick needle was stirring in my stomach, and even some liquid was slowly flowing out of my lower body. The man didn't know what he saw. His eyes widened with fear, and he ran away, shouting as he ran. I didn't do anything. I endured the pain and slowly stood up, using the light from outside to see clearly what was flowing out from under me. It's blood. At this moment, I suddenly wanted to cry. My life has become a mess since I had a relationship with Vim. I blamed him, but I missed him so much that I couldn't help but call him in the end. The moment his voice rang out, I felt the long-lost sense of security. I tried to control the sobs in my voice. Vim, can you come pick me up? When I saw him running towards me with sweat all over his face, I finally fainted with relief. But a thought slowly came to my mind. Did I tell him I was here? 6. When I woke up again, I was already in the hospital. The doctor who examined me was still the same doctor as last time. Vim went out to buy me food when he saw me wake up. A little later, the doctor came in with the medical records. Kerwin, your medical examination results are out. Since it is early in pregnancy, the fetus is unstable and there is some bleeding. But the baby was saved because it was sent to her in time. However, if it is not properly managed, there is a possibility of miscarriage later. Don't do strenuous exercise during this period, and try to stay with the child's father. His pheromones can have a certain soothing effect on you. I was stunned. Why do I recognize all the words the doctor said, but when he put them together into a sentence, I can't understand anything at all? What fetus? What pregnancy? I am pregnant? Pregnant with Vim's child? I sat on the hospital bed and didn't even know when the doctor left. The door suddenly opened, revealing Vim's smiling face. He was holding the packed porridge in his hand. Hurry up and eat something. I know you're picky about food, so I ran 2 blocks to buy this for you. I suddenly felt sad. Should this child stay? What should I tell Vim? Seeing that I didn't respond, he sighed, put the porridge on the table, stood in front of me and touched my head. I know everything. It's okay. I looked up in shock. You know everything? He nodded. Your scent is so strong, it's hard not to know it. But you were so mean to not tell me that you had differentiated into an omega. No wonder you were in such a hurry to move out. I don't know whether I feel more disappointed or relieved. He doesn't know yet that I'm pregnant. I differentiated too suddenly and became pregnant too suddenly. I was not ready to confess, nor was I ready to accept that I was about to give birth to a life. All the unknown things made me confused. 7. After communicating with the doctor, I decided to abort the baby. But he said that my hormones were out of whack and I needed Vim's pheromones to soothe me, and he could only have an induced abortion after I got my body back in shape. It's almost 2 weeks, so let me take this time to think about it carefully. I moved back to Vim's house. But we can no longer sleep in the same bed together without any reservations as before. He cleaned out the guest room, which had not been used for a long time. I didn't dare to sniff Vim openly, so I could only sneak onto his bed when he was not at home, bury my face in the sheets and take deep breaths. Only then did I feel alive again. Or hide the clothes he has worn, hold them in your arms when you sleep at night, and put them in the washing machine the next day. I thought I was doing it secretly, but one day I was caught by him. I was on leave that day and he was out for something during the day. Around noon, my glands suddenly started to feel hot and my head became dizzy. I thought I could just set the alarm, take a nap in his bed, and clean up before he came back. I even specifically asked him what time he would be home. But I didn't expect that after smelling his pheromones, my condition not only didn't get better, but even got worse. These things are only temporarily stained with his pheromones. What I need is the more real, warm Vim himself. The uneasiness deep inside was growing more and more serious. Just as I was rubbing my cheek on his quilt unconsciously, the bedroom door opened. My mind went blank in an instant, and my neck was stiff and I dared not turn my head. After a while, a light laugh sounded behind him. "The whole room smells like you. Are you puppy marking?" "Why did Vim come back? Didn't you say you would come back after dinner? Why did you come back in the afternoon?" Before I could ask, I suddenly felt a weight on my body. He pressed on top of me, his nose tip vaguely touching my gland, and sighed, "What a nice smell." I was so weak and ashamed of being caught that I had no time to care about the distance between us. I just hid my face in the pillow. I don't know how long it took, but under the comfort of Vim's pheromones, I gradually fell asleep. When I woke up again, it was already late at night. My back rested in his arms, and I felt a steady stream of warmth. I moved slightly and suddenly sat up suddenly. He was awakened by my movement and slowly stood up and leaned on my shoulder and neck. His lazy and hoarse voice just after waking up rang in my ears. "Are you hungry?" The tip of his nose began to touch my glands again. I reacted quickly and pushed him away, covering the gland with one hand. "Stop smelling it." He stared at me with a half smile. "It's just a sniff, it won't cost you a piece of meat. Are you scared?" I can't stand provocation, so I got angry immediately. "Who's afraid? Smell it. I want to smell yours too." Unexpectedly, his breathing suddenly became heavier, and he even stretched the back of his neck in front of me. "Oh, smell it quickly." I was stunned. The scent of roses emanating from the glands made it difficult for me to control myself. When I came to my senses again, my lips were already pressed against hers. After realizing what I was doing, I blushed and quickly got out of bed, leaving only one sentence: "I'm going to take a shower." He quickly fled from his room. "It's too dangerous. I feel like if I stay any longer, something uncontrollable will happen." 9. Vim seems to have taken the wrong medicine these days, always taking every opportunity to get close to me. From time to time he would pull up my collar and come close to smell it. In the end of the struggle, I would often be pinned down in his arms with a red face, sitting on his lap while he licked my glands like a pervert. I am often bewildered by his pheromones, and if I am not comforted for one day, I will always feel uneasy. After my parents found out that I had differentiated into an omega, they couldn't believe it and took me to the hospital for a checkup immediately. I didn't dare tell them the specific reason and the fact that I was pregnant, and I didn't dare go to the hospital with them. I could only show my ID card with the gender changed. Only then did they believe that I was not joking. These days, my mother has been secretly introducing alphas to me and even called me back for blind dates under the pretext of family gatherings. I couldn't persuade my mother, so I had to agree to meet the alpha and have a meal with him. In the restaurant, the man politely extended his hand to me. "Hello, are you Mr. Kerwin? I'm Darnell." I quickly shook his hand back, but before I could say a few words, the man quickly pulled his hand back and gently wiped the fingers that had touched mine with a handkerchief. He crossed his legs, put his hands on his knees, tilted his head back slightly, and looked down at me with a superior attitude. I'll be frank with you. An Omega like you, Kerwin, is too tall and has trained muscles. You don't have the graceful body shape that an Omega should have. You are too poor. You should not be very popular with alphas, right? I also heard that you are a secondary differentiation, and you have always been a beta. To be honest, it is difficult for you to marry someone who suits your heart with your conditions. Besides, you haven't graduated yet, you don't have a formal job, and your parents' family background is not that good. I hope that after you marry me, you will stay at home and do your job as a wife. Don't go out and show your face. You must quit your job. It's best to get married quickly so that we can give an explanation to both sets of parents. But you don't have to worry. As long as there are no principled issues, I will not divorce you. I hope you can give birth to a high-quality alpha for me. What do you think? The man's eloquent talk shocked me to my core. Does this bastard know what he's talking about? I clenched the cup of water in my hand, and before I could pour it on his head, I heard a pop sound. I haven't started yet? I slowly raised my head and saw Vim's handsome face that was extremely angry. I'm used to seeing him being so nonchalant on most days, and I rarely see him get angry. The last time I was this angry was when I was in elementary school and had a fight with someone older than me. I almost lost an eye. Obviously he was shorter than me at that time, but he beat those guys so hard that they begged for mercy. He held me by his side and warned everyone not to bully me. The way I looked when I was a child gradually overlapped with the way I am now. He grabbed Arnell's collar and raised his fist high. Who gave you permission to insult Kerwin? You're not even worthy of licking his toenails. Everyone else in the restaurant was drawn to my attention, and I was afraid of making a big deal out of it, so I didn't have time to ask Vim why he was there. I just wanted to pull him away quickly. After I got in the car, I saw that he was still silent and unhappy, and my heart suddenly began to ache. I touched his frowning brows and said, "Okay, don't be unhappy." He suddenly grabbed my fingertips, held me in his arms, and his breath sprayed on my neck. His voice was filled with unusual grievance. "I can't stand people saying bad things about you." I covered my chest and felt my heart beating violently. It was so fast that it almost shattered my eardrums. "We are so close, can he hear it too?" Before I could recover, I heard his deep voice again. "Who is that man?" I choked, feeling inexplicably guilty. "The blind date my mother introduced." The voice became smaller and smaller. He didn't say anything, just held me in silence. When we got home, he pushed me down on the bed again, his warm body pressed against mine. Just as I was about to struggle, he warned me. "Don't move, release more pheromones, I'm in a bad mood right now." "If you are in a bad mood, can you feel better by smelling my pheromones?" I couldn't help but ask, "Are you a drug addict?" Unexpectedly, he nodded seriously. "Well, I'm only addicted to you." Something is so wrong. Ever since I differentiated into an Omega, Vim has become more and more clingy. Is it because of pheromones? Or is it because of... I whispered, "Vim, do you like me?" The only response I got was the sound of long breathing. I looked up and found that he was already fast asleep. There is a dark spot under his eyes, probably because he hasn't had a good sleep for a long time. I patted his head and sighed. This idiot, I was delayed by him and forgot to ask him how he knew I was in the restaurant. 11. There were still 3 days before I had to go to the hospital, and I was feeling increasingly uneasy. I have trouble falling asleep every night, and even if I fall asleep, I have nightmares. I dreamed that the child I had aborted was lying at my feet, covered in blood, grabbing my trouser legs and crying, asking me why I didn't want him. The scene changed and Vim appeared in front of me. He picked up the child and looked at me disappointedly without saying a word. Under such mental torture, I gradually couldn't eat anything. After finally eating a little, I would vomit it out the next second. In just a few days, I lost 3 pounds. In response to Vim's concerned inquiries, I could only say that I had too much to do at work and was under a lot of pressure. Seeing that he had no idea, I began to regret it again. Is it right not to tell him about the pregnancy? Maybe I should discuss it with him? After suffering both mental and physical torture, I finally had to go to the hospital one day. I finally couldn't help it and took a day off to go to Vim's workplace to see him. He joined his father's company after his internship, and because I had come to pick him up several times before, some of the company's employees knew me. When he saw me, he took the initiative to say hello. Hello, Kerwin. I nodded politely. Hello, is Vim here? Several people looked at each other, then shook their heads together. It seems like Vim didn't come to the company today. Didn't come to the company? But he didn't say he was going on a business trip recently. Was there something urgent? I walked out of the company gate with doubts in mind and saw exquisite pastries displayed in the roadside window. Let's buy some and take them back. Vim loves sweets so much. I hope that for the sake of the cake, he won't be too angry when he hears what I have to say. The store was a bit busy, and it seemed that they were short-staffed. After I chose the cake, the employee asked me to sit down and wait for a while. I supported my chin and stared out of the glass, when a familiar figure suddenly flashed by. I quickly came to my senses and found Vim chatting and laughing with a woman. Even when there were cars passing by, he gently pulled the woman to the other side. The woman was holding flowers and smiling happily, as if she had heard something very interesting. My heart sank to the bottom. Who is she? Vim's girlfriend? He is not at work. Is he on a date with someone else? What's even sadder is that even in this situation, I can't even feel jealous. I have nothing to do with him. He will have his own family and children. If he knew that the person he had always regarded as a good brother was actually pregnant with his child, he would definitely be disgusted. I went home with the packed cake in a daze. One person ate the whole thing in silence, then went to the toilet and vomited it all out. When Vim came home, I was already lying on my side. Ever since he was caught last time, he either forced me to sleep in his arms or sneaked into my bed after I fell asleep. We slept together almost every night these days. The bed felt much colder today without him, and I grabbed the clothes I had just taken out of his closet and fell into a deep sleep. I don't know how long it took, but my cold feet finally found a warm place and were tightly wrapped. I didn't sleep very deeply and woke up quickly. I found Vim half kneeling at the foot of the bed, holding my feet with his hands. He smiled when he saw me wake up. Did I wake you up? Your feet are so cold. Let me warm them up for you. I suddenly felt like crying. Why was he so nice to me and always doing things that made me misunderstand? Seeing that I didn't say anything, he didn't get angry and brought up another matter. Did you eat the cake behind my back? The cake box is still on the table. You can't eat, right? Do you feel better? Speaking of cake, I think of the scene I saw during the day. She immediately kicked his hand away, pulled the quilt up to cover her head, and ordered him to leave in a muffled voice. Get out. I know I shouldn't lose my temper with him, but since I became pregnant, affected by hormones, I have become increasingly unable to control my temper. He didn't take it seriously and smiled as he squeezed into my bed and held me in his arms. No, I want to roll in. I was really angry. I sat up suddenly and kicked him off the bed. I'll say it one last time, don't touch me, get out. He held his stomach in pain, looked at me deeply after hearing what I said, slowly stood up, pushed the door and left. This kind of silence gradually overlapped with my dream. I couldn't fall asleep anymore and stayed awake until dawn. 12. When I left home in the morning, there was no movement in Vim's bedroom. He must have not woken up yet. I took a taxi to the hospital. The car window was wide open and the wind irritated my eyes and brought tears to my eyes. I stared at the passing scenery outside and silently said goodbye to my unborn child in my heart. When Vim woke up and sent me a message asking me where I was as if nothing had happened, I had already finished communicating with the doctor in the hospital and was preparing to pay the bill. While waiting for the preoperative examination, the cell phone rang over and over again, all from Vim. I was so nervous that my palms were sweating, and finally I turned off my phone. The nurse poured me a glass of water and comforted me. Don't be nervous, the operation will be quick. Medical treatment is advanced nowadays, and it won't cause much harm to your body. I smiled at her gratefully, holding the paper cup tightly. I don't know how long I waited, but finally my name was called. Just before the nurse took me to the operating room, my wrist was suddenly pulled back with great force. I turned around in shock and met Vim's anxious eyes. He looked me up and down, glanced at the nurse warily, and then held me in his arms. "Are you sick? Why are you in the hospital?" The nurse kindly reminded, "Kerwin, there are people waiting behind you. Please come with me to the surgery as soon as possible." Vim exclaimed, "Surgery? Why do you want surgery?" I'm completely down. At this time, a pair of sisters passed by us, and their conversation drifted into our ears. "I've already told you that guy is not a good guy. He didn't care about you after he tricked you into bed. He didn't even want to pay for the abortion and didn't even look at you. I really don't understand why you like him." He looked around again, seemed to understand something, and pulled my wrist and walked out of the hospital. "Kerwin, let's talk." 13. When I came to my senses again, I was already sitting in a coffee shop with him. Because of my pregnancy, he only ordered me a glass of warm water. I lowered my head, not knowing how to start. He was the first to break the silence. "Why didn't you tell me?" This sentence instantly made tears well up in my eyes. I took a deep breath and looked up at him. "Why should I tell you? Are you anyone to me?" He played with the sugar cube in his hand for a moment, then threw it into the coffee and suddenly said, "Was it that night?" I was stunned. "That night? He remembers everything?" Seeing my questioning look, he smiled, stood up, and squeezed next to me, leaning close to me and resting his head on my shoulder. "No matter how much I drink, I won't black out for the whole night. Although I can't remember everything, I can still remember some fragments, such as someone shouting no all night long." He imitated the screams I made that night, and my face turned red and I quickly covered his mouth. But he stuck out his tongue and licked my fingers, and when he noticed that I was retreating, he grabbed my hand forcefully. When I woke up, a certain sneaky little cat had escaped. I originally wanted to punish you and then walk away, but when I saw you trying your best to hide it in front of me and it looked so cute, I couldn't help but tease you all the time. But I didn't expect that you would differentiate into an omega. Your pheromones are too strong, and you don't have a suppressant patch on. I almost couldn't help but pounce on you several times. Otherwise, do you think you can move out of my house safely? No wonder he was so silent the day I moved out. He suddenly sighed, "It's a pity that you are such a blockhead. I've been so good to you and what I've done for you has long gone beyond the normal distance between friends, but you still foolishly think that we are good brothers. You know I'm an adult alpha. When an omega like you exposes the back of your neck without any precautions, it's a naked seduction. I've almost become a monk to suppress the desire to make your ass bloom. So, now you know how I feel about you?" 14. I never thought that Vim would be the first one to admit his feelings. No, I should say that I never thought that I would be with Vim. But I thought of the woman from yesterday again. I pushed his head away and moved my butt away from him. "Don't lie to me, I saw it all. You were with a woman yesterday." He frowned and thought for a moment, then burst out laughing, and the sound became louder and louder. Seeing that everyone turned to look, I quickly covered his mouth. "Keep your voice down." He then calmed down a little, and answered after he had finished laughing. "Are you a pig? That's my aunt. She was abroad before and you didn't see her. She just returned yesterday and didn't know the way. I took her to the company to find my dad." He smiled ambiguously, "So our Kerwin is jealous." Only then did I realize that I had misunderstood Vim, and my face turned red instantly. Seeing him smiling with ill intention, I banged my head on the table and refused to look up. He called me a few times, and the names became more and more ambiguous. "Kerwin. Kerwin. Kerwin. Baby." He whispered the last two words into my ear, his hot and moist breath touching my earlobe. I shuddered, looked up, and glared at him. Unexpectedly, he quickly moved forward and pecked my lips. "I love you, baby." Just a few words instantly extinguished my anger. Before I could recover from this sweet feeling, he started to settle the score with me. "Now it's your turn to talk about pregnancy and abortion. What can I say? I think you don't like me and are afraid of giving birth to a child who will grow up without a father. Rather than letting him be unhappy when he is born, it is better not to have him." "But," I snorted coldly, "before we talk about this, you need to explain to me why you knew I was in the hospital, and the time in the restaurant before, and even earlier when I was near the company." He choked up, which was unusual for him. He hesitated for a long time, and finally admitted reluctantly under my violence. I installed a location tracking device in your watch. I looked at the watch on my wrist. It was the birthday present he gave me when I was 20 years old. He never allowed me to take it off. Sometimes, even when I took it off in the shower and forgot to put it on, he would go into a one-sided Cold War with me for a whole day. Over time, I developed a habit and always felt something was wrong when I didn't wear a watch. Really? I asked unintentionally. Did you ever since then? Before he finished speaking, he proved his intention with his actions. His warm and soft lips were imprinted on my lips. After licking them gently, he smiled with his eyes curved. Maybe it was earlier, I don't know when, I became very concerned about your every move, and when you didn't respond to my messages, I always liked to wonder what you were doing. I wanted to see you every day. At that time, I was thinking that if my father didn't agree with me being with Beta, I would elope with you. In order to know where you are at all times so that I can find you, I deliberately installed a location sensor in my watch. You idiot, you didn't notice it for so long. I muttered. How could I possibly find out? 15. The doctor who induced my abortion became my pregnancy-preserving doctor. We chose a time and informed our parents. Both sides were very satisfied and the wedding date was set quickly. I stopped my internship when the month was over, and Vim's father gave him a long vacation so that he could stay at home and spend time with me. Because of my growing belly, I don't like going out anymore, and I often stay with him on the sofa in the living room watching various movies. He likes to hug me from behind, let me sit on his lap, and smell my glands from time to time. As he smelled it, the hard canine teeth pressed against him, and his voice became hoarse. Baby, you smell so good, can I have a bite? After chewing for a while, they entered the stage of pulling the light. In the later stages of my pregnancy, I moved into the hospital to prevent any accidents. But that day I started feeling chest tightness and shortness of breath in the morning, so I wanted to go for a walk in the hospital garden. Unexpectedly, as soon as I entered the elevator, it suddenly broke down. I was frightened and my water broke. After being rescued, I was quickly sent to the delivery room. Later, my mother told me that Vim cried outside the delivery room for as long as I stayed in it. He never believed in ghosts or gods, but he kept kneeling on the ground praying for my safety. After our daughter was born safely, he didn't even want to look at our child. He was only concerned with asking the doctor about my safety. After learning that I was safe, he breathed a sigh of relief and collapsed on the ground. When I woke up, Vim was still sleeping beside my bed. I smoothed his frowning brows when he was asleep. He was awakened by my movement and held my fingertips. Before he could speak, I interrupted him. I love you, Vim. He was stunned, and after a moment he buried his face in my palms, and hot liquid flowed out from between my fingers. He choked out, I love you too, Kerwin. How did you become a crybaby?